Hi, everybody. Charlie and Linda are here with Bloom Talks. This is my honey. We are together almost 50 years. So we've been learning a lot about relationships during that time. And for those of you who may be new to Bloom Talks, we are both consultants and counselors, workshop leaders, bloggers, and
now we're TV stars.
Yeah, now
Yay.
we're having this Facebook Live to add to the fun that we do, and we're all about relationships and how to enjoy them to the absolute max, how to get the absolute most out of them. We've written a few books. We've got a new one coming out the end of this month, and they're all about relationships and how to learn from them. So this topic about opposites attract is a very crucial topic, because the very same things that magnetize us, not only to a romantic partner, but also to our friends, the people that we're most attracted to, the people that we have some inner knowing that brings us to them, is somewhat unconscious on our part about what is it about this person that I find so appealing. And this is a magic factor. This is an unknown. It's somewhat mysterious and intriguing to investigate. What is it? And we have found this over the years of our research, working with couples, looking at our own relationship, and writing our books, that we find that there is a lot of truth in this opposites attract business. When we teach our workshops, we call it complements attract. And there's some very deep, wise part of us. Some people call that intuition. Some people call that natural knowing, that will sense that the other person is strong in areas that we're not. And they're also sensing that we're strong in areas that they aren't. And this drive to become a whole person, to really fill out in the areas that we are our weaker suits. Some deep knowing part of us knows that. So they bring us to somebody who is, more accomplished in some ways, because we really want to learn from them. And the very same things that are so magnetizing in the beginning of the relationship, after the infatuation fades, those are the things that irritate us and drive us a little crazy in the other person, until we can learn how to open to it and really learn from them about some part of ourselves that needs to be developed. So I'm grateful to you for being my teacher and being my student, because I feel like I've come a long ways, babe, and that I've become more whole as a result of this teacher-student, investigation that we've done. And thank you for being a gentle teacher most of the time.
What do you mean most of the time?
Most of the time.
Well, that's one of the ways that we complement each other.
Yeah.
And I really like this distinction between complementing each other and being opposite of each other. Yesterday, when I was thinking about this talk, I looked up the word complement in the dictionary, and here's what it said. It said a complement is something that brings to completion or wholeness. It's to add something. To complement is to add something in a way that enhances or improves it, makes it perfect. And for those of you who don't know the origin of the word perfect, in case you haven't noticed, by the way, I was an English major. So I love words. I'm fascinated with words. And the origin of the word perfect means whole. When something is perfect, it's not just fulfilling certain expectations of a model or a standard, like that's a perfect pitch or a perfect batting stance, or that's a perfectly designed car. It's that, but it's also, it makes it, it's complete now. It's whole. And when we talk about attracting somebody who is your complement, we're talking about attracting somebody and being attracted to somebody who, on a gut level feeling, like Linda said, makes you feel more whole, brings about a certain quality of experience, a certain understanding, a certain sense, a certain awareness, a certain knowledge that enables you to become actually more complete. Now, that might sound kind of strange because, I mean, like, aren't we complete? I mean, we all have this body, you know, we all are kind of complete as we are. But as most of us are aware, in the socialization process and growing up, there are aspects of ourselves that we tend, for all kinds of reasons, mostly because of the way people respond to us, we tend to either favor those qualities and reinforce them in our personalities and in our behaviors, or we hold them in disfavor, at which point we decide that they're not okay, that we're not okay having those, that people might not like them or approve of them. And so those go into the shadow. We push them away, out of sight, out of other people's awareness. In this series, by the way, we're going to be talking a lot about shadow and the power of integrating some of those disowned parts. Mm-hmm. But for our sake, our purposes today, we're going to be talking about complementing each other and bringing into the relationship, offering to the other person aspects of ourselves that they may not have as fully developed as we do, which may likely have been one of the sources of attraction to us and to them, that we each felt and saw qualities that, at least at first, like Linda said, in the early infatuation stages, we really delighted in. You know, oh, that person is so effervescent. They're so responsible. They're so willing to be vulnerable. They're so risky, you know, and these things that we most were attracted to and are attracted to often can be things that we haven't as fully developed as they have. And so this is what represents the chemistry that Linda was talking about.
I'd like to give you, I want to give you some more examples and be looking to your own experience with who you're attracted to and what the qualities that may complement you. Do you know that they're developed in areas that you're not? When I first met Charlie, I really wanted peace in my relationship. I wanted comfort and security and predictability. And so I was a stand for that. Charlie wanted change and adventure and risk, and I was attracted to that. When we were polarized, we were at opposite ends of the pole about it. It was divisive. It was difficult. When we had kids, I wanted structure. I wanted limits and consequences. Mr. Spontaneity over here was a laissez-faire parent. Do you know, the world's going to give them consequences. So I was attracted to learn about not having such a control grip on the kids, and he taught me a lot about that. I like to think that I taught him about the value of having some comfort from structure and predictability. He taught me a lot about risk.
You definitely did. And I just want to say one caveat on that, although you might imagine that both of us found it, shall we say, a little bit uncomfortable.
Yes.
To have to deal with somebody who's on the other end of the spectrum, and we really were pretty far apart on that spectrum. And in fact, the more we tried to get the other person over on our side, the greater the gap seemed to grow to.
Yeah, because nobody wants to feel like they're bad and wrong. They want to feel like I'm respected and valued for my style of being in the world. So,
yeah, but we did both get to see eventually It took a while. We don't have to go into how long it took.
Value on both sides.
Yeah, but we saw that, wait a minute now, she's not all wrong. She's not just a control freak and really all, needs to be straightened out by my way of thinking. But I began to see that there really is some validity to having maybe a little bit more discipline in the family than there was.
Thank you.
So,
and it showed up in the house too.
Yeah.
So you often have one in the pair who's the Neatnik, who likes everything to be clean and orderly. Charlie's very clean, but he's relaxed about, I'm not saying that you're a slob, but you're more relaxed. And I needed to relax my standards a little bit and not be so perfectionistic about things being orderly all the time, particularly when the children were small and toys were all over the place. I was making myself nuts trying to have order in the environment. When you have small kids, you can't have that much order. So Charlie taught me a lot about relaxing my standards for some peace of mind. I like to think that I've taught him something about an orderly environment and living in a place where when you want to find something, you can actually put your hands on it instead of wasting time looking for things. Another place where it's really shown up with us, and we find this with a lot of couples that we work with, is the extrovert and the introvert. And I have been called a flaming extrovert because I'm so social and I'm so relational and I'm so verbal, and I figure out what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and where I'm going while I'm talking. Charlie, on the other hand, is introverted, and where he goes under stress is he wants to be quiet. And it's not just random that people who are different find each other. And even the people who are the night owls and the early morning wakers, they have found they don't get together randomly either. That more often than not, you don't get two night owls together and you don't get two early bird larks together. You get an early bird with a night owl. And you can open to the difference and stretch into each other's world so that it doesn't have to be divisive, just like the structure and order with the person who's more laissez-faire, or the strict disciplinarian with the more lenient disciplinarian. No matter what the continuum is, it doesn't have to be divisive, but what it requires is to open to learning from the other person and be curious and interested about their way of being, not to make our own way of being bad and wrong or their way of being to be bad and wrong.
Yeah, speaking of which, I just want to add to that's easier said than done.
Yes, it's a piece of work.
May have noticed that simply recognizing that, oh, well, this person has something of value to offer, and I can open to that and appreciate it. And, I can do that. Well, as it turns out, that is quite a bit easier said than done for reasons that, probably are fairly obvious. I mean, for one thing, both partners have come into relationship with each other, even if they're young, with quite a few years of having reinforced certain predispositions and tendencies and values and behaviors. So the idea of having to disengage from them and let go of them, or detach from things that feel like that's just the way it is, that's just who I am, that's the correct way of being. The idea of doing that is going to be met with resistance. And if we don't acknowledge our own resistance, which is generally driven by fear of what might happen or what might experience if I let go of my identity, if I let go of my truth, if I let go of the way I know it's supposed to be, if we don't acknowledge that and deal with that, then here's what's inevitable to happen, and that is that that resistance that I have to owning those parts of myself that I'm being invited through my relationship to open to, is that conflict, that resistance is going to get projected onto guess who?
Mm-hmm.
And then if she's got the same thing going with me in terms of seeing me as the source of her upset, insecurity, fear, or whatever, then we've got the makings for, what, some kind of a
trouble
difference that is potentially going to be disruptive in the relationship. And so it's what I would consider to be a setup. It's like we are literally set up to get into relationship with people with whom we are guaranteed to have some kind of a conflict and a difference. Mm-hmm. And what we like to say about that is that differences are inevitable for the reasons that we are talking about today. We attract compliments because it honors the inner urge that all human beings have towards wholeness. Mm-hmm. And that's what gravity, when you think about what it is, if somebody asks you what it is about your partner that you are most attracted to, or that you are, the things that they would say would probably not be the essence of what really brought you together, because what that is something that we're not even conscious of.
I just want to say something about this fear piece, because it's huge. It's bigger than a lot of people realize. And in the early part of a relationship, even the beginning years of a relationship, there can be such fear about naming how different we actually are, for fear that we're some kind of a hopeless mismatch. And when I started...
by the way, those do exist.
There are some mismatch
such
pairs.
A thing as a hopeless mismatch, and we are not in favor of whatever the cost, whatever the conditions, whatever the circumstances, at all costs, save the marriage, save the relationship. There are cases in which it really is better for all parties concerned to dissolve that if it becomes necessary. And what we've seen is that most people quit too soon, but we certainly don't think that hanging in there forever, no matter what, is always the best thing.
That's my stance also. Sometimes the most humane, loving, kind thing to do is to sever a tie. If you find that you really are so different, that you're going to different places, that your values are too discrepant, the kindest thing to do is to tell the truth about that, let go with as much kindness as you can, to free each other to go on to find somebody who is more compatible. But we see a lot of people who give up too soon before they really investigate, can we be who we are at the core of our being, and can we make a big space for our differences to peacefully coexist there? Maybe that spark, that passion, that aliveness actually comes from our differences. It can be intriguing once you start to inquire into it. So I want to just say that getting over our fear, or taking the fear and going for it anyway, about being committed to seeing what we might be able to co-create together, that I don't have to give up me to be loved by you, that I don't have to control you with some kind of a home improvement program to try to make you more like me, which is going to be self-defeating anyway. But to see, can we create a respectful space that can hold the tension of the opposites? When I learned that from Marion Woodman, I thought, yes, that is a higher way of being, to move away from the black and white thinking, the right and wrong thinking, the good and bad thinking, to have a broader spectrum of okayness and what will work. So that I could see Charlie could be less organized, and I could take responsibility for buying the file cabinets and labeling the file folders and having things where I wanted it in our business so I could get my hands on it. If I wanted to have, a garden that wasn't full of weeds, I could take more responsibility for either doing it myself or getting the gardener to come over. if I wanted to have higher structure level with my life, I could have that. I didn't have to necessarily impose it upon him. And this was rising up to a higher level of responsibility for seeing to it that I could have the things that were really important to me. Because if I'm in a disorganized environment, my anxiety goes up. So I have responsibility for keeping my anxiety at a level that's workable for me.
So for those of you who may be thinking now, well, that doesn't sound very fair. She's the one that's doing all the work. She's got to organize everything, and she's got to weed the garden, and she's got to get everything handled. And what does he do? Well, you think it's easy being laid back? No, that's just a joke. Actually, believe it or not, here's what has happened in the process. That while we have both maintained, while we have both worked towards accommodating each other in ways that we can without feeling resentful, of course.
Yeah.
We call it leaning into each other's world, entering into that world, and rather than trying to get them to cooperate with our way of being, to learn more about their world. How is it that you see things such that that's what you tend to do? How is it that you understand the world that's different from me such that you have an interpretation that's so different? And as we bring that interest and that curiosity into our relationship and look to each other with that kind of openness and that desire to understand, rather than a desire to get them to cooperate with our program. This is key. I'm going to say that again. A desire to understand their world. How is it that you see things? I want to know that. I want, it makes sense to you. I don't quite get it, but can you help me with that? As opposed to try to get you to cooperate with my picture of the way it is, the way it's supposed to be.
So I have a great example.
Yeah.
Charlie has always been a champ about self-care. He came into this relationship thinking he ought to have breaks and he ought to have good vacation time and he ought to really be able to enjoy life. And he's been the chief executive officer in charge of fun. He's still the chief executive officer in charge of fun. But me, I come from the long-suffering martyr tradition. You just have to work hard, work hard, work hard. And I wanted him to be more like me in the beginning. And I'm so glad that he didn't take influence from me in that area.
Well, I did take influence from you in that area and another area.
But you didn't become a terrible flaming workaholic the decades.
I was over here, you were over here. I came towards you, you came towards me. But like we never. We're never going to be where each other was. That's never going to happen.
I'll never be in his league. He's Mr. Fun and Spontaneity. But I have moved a lot, and I've learned a lot, and you've made it fun to learn. And I have learned a tremendous amount about self-care and taking many breaks during the day and taking real vacations where I don't take work with me on the vacation to Hawaii or wherever we're going. And I'm really grateful for it. And I stretched into your world. I met you with curiosity and wonder about how is it that you can gift yourself with all of this fun and relaxation and time
why don't
off.
you say something, because it'd be better coming from you than from me.
Yeah.
About how you see I've stretched into your world. I've adopted and developed some of the traits
much
and
more
practices,
organized, much more
practices
structured
that you have.
Much more commitment muscles are strong. Yeah. And caring and consideration and sensitivity.
So the important thing here is that we don't lose our sense of who we are fundamentally. We don't compromise our own integrity, but we also, at the same time that we're honoring our own truth and our own nature, we are moving into another world and developing another way of being that is integrating parts of ourself that were potentially there, but not so fully developed. So I've become much more detail oriented. I've become more able to focus on what needs to be done, more responsible in certain ways. Not that I've become irresponsible, but I have held a higher standard for myself. And this is the important thing, I haven't dishonored or lost my sense of who I am. I haven't compromised my own truth and my own integrity. And that, by the way, is probably the biggest challenge of all relationships, is to maintain a deep, respectful connection with the truth of who you are and to act in accordance with that, and at the same time have that level of intentionality and commitment to supporting your partner.
And I want to say that the research bears out the truth of what we have found, that John Gottman is a famous researcher in our field, and he has done research for decades, and he has found that the same differences that couples come in with at the beginning of their relationship, after they're together 20, 30, 40, 50 years, they still have some same differences. The really happy ones have made a big space, and they've learned from each other. So this is not just pop psychology, or it's not just Linda and Charlie's belief. We do a thorough search of the literature to find out what the experts in the field are saying and what the research in the field is saying. So we're delighted to have you with us. We're very happy when you send your questions and concerns to us so we can gear our talks to what you're most concerned about. I want to tell you the topic for next week, 12:30, same time, same station, Thursdays at 12:30 Pacific time. We're going to be talking about deal breakers. The title of that talk is The Real Deal About Deal Breakers. We hope that if you've gotten value here today, that you will share with your friends while it's fresh in your mind. Send them a message and say, go look in the archives, because all of these talks are going to be archived. And be sure to spread the word around that Charlie and Linda are giving out free samples about how to take your relationships up to the going for the gold status.
So thank you for tuning in. And between now and then, just keep talking.
Okay.